Hey, what's going on, everybody? It is Aaron Trevino here, and we have another wonderful guest. We have Charles from Boston, Massachusetts. How you doing, Charles?
I'm very good. Yourself, Aaron?
I can't complain. It was a crazy week last week, beautiful weather these past few days, but it's great to have you on the show.
I appreciate the opportunity to be on.
Yeah, absolutely, Charles. So for those of us who aren't too familiar with you, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. My name is Charles Hadsell. I'm the co-founder and CEO of ePropertyCare. We are a PropTech company that provides smart building solutions for landlords, developers, and property managers.
Okay, very good, very good. So you're dealing strictly in the real estate sort of construction realm?
Yeah, both on the construction side, but also on like retrofits of existing units, existing properties. We found that there was a big gap in the deployment of smart home tech from the household to the rental, and that's kind of the gap that we're serving.
Yeah, absolutely. Just based off the few conversations that we've had about this, looking on your website, kind of doing a bit of research on this is a really unique service that I think we're in the very infant stages here of something pretty big.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's we're in the early days of it, but we are kind of seeing how there's a latent demand and a latent need, and especially when events like last week in the South with the frozen pipes and the cold weather caused a bunch of damage. That drives the need for the deployment of smart building technology to prevent those types of disasters.
Yeah, absolutely, Charles. If you wouldn't mind, I'm also, pretty interested in you as well. I mean, growing up, did you always know you wanted to kind of be in the real estate construction tech sort of industry, or what was your background like prior to this?
Yeah, I actually spent 15 years in the semiconductor world. Working at big semi companies like Texas Instruments and Analog Devices. So I actually kind of have a technical engineering background, but through my various corporate moves and relocations, I kind of acquired a real estate portfolio. So I got to a place where I had rental properties in Houston, Dallas, Chicago, Boston. I'm like, okay, I need a better way to manage these remotely, because they weren't I wasn't in the same city as my rentals. So I'm like, okay, well, what tech solutions are out there that could help me do this? And did a bunch of research, and there was really nothing, because everything required Wi-Fi. And Wi-Fi for like landlords is a very hard modality to deploy in most cases because it's just not cost effective. So decided to kind of focus on building a solution that could basically solve my own problem. How could I remotely monitor, protect, and control my properties, over cellular to avoid that last mile expensive connection, but also have just a better awareness of what's going on in my property. So it's kind of a eating my own dog food, so to speak. So I kind of happened into real estate through that. And then I reached a point in my career, I'm like, you know what, there's a big opportunity here. I think there's a lot of landlords and developers, like me, who have this kind of need. Let me give it a shot and see what happens. So that was about 3 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely, Charles. I think it's really interesting what we're kind of going through in basically just the real estate market across America in general is that, people would poke fun at the real estate industry saying it's one of the more antiquated industries in terms of technology. And now we're kind of getting this new influx of tech, and it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's definitely an exciting time because I think there's been a lot of smart technology, smart home tech out there for many years. But I think it's finally hit the price point, the reliability needed to really make it feasible to deploy in these larger contexts to large multi-family housing projects, new construction developments. So I think now, like we said earlier, we're seeing the early stages of this kind of surge of tech in the building industry, and I think it's going to be a very exciting. There's a lot of benefits to be realized by the owners, the property managers, the landlords, the tenants and residents. Everyone can get a benefit from this.
Yeah, absolutely. Even just being in college, I remember the first time I ever saw a fob key, right? So, maybe you have a little wand, I guess on your keychain. And I thought that was the neatest thing. I thought, wow, these apartments don't need to cut any keys, right?
Yeah, and now you don't need the fobs. You can use your phone to lock and unlock doors and not have to worry about losing those fobs and paying 3x the key price to get it replaced. So, so yeah, things have come a long way. So access is like one of the modalities, but now there's a lot of other like cool things that one could achieve in an apartment, and it kind of leads to like an amenities arms race, because now tenants have a higher and higher expectation of like where they're gonna live, what technology is going to be available. So it's leading to a pretty cool influence on the industry to kind of put more tech into buildings, so that you could get sticky tenants that will choose you and pay more for your rental property over someone else's property.
Yes, absolutely, Charles. Couldn't agree more. You'd used the word a bit earlier before you talked about, maybe smart tech or smart technology. To you, what does smart tech really mean?
So I kind of define it as something that has a persistent internet connection, that lets you do things remotely. Because like for example, I think everyone kind of uses Nest thermostat as the example of like the first kind of really, I'd say, consumer smart home device that you can control your thermostat. So thermostats and temperature sensing is one like modality of smart tech. I think there's other modalities, along the access control, water protection, video and lighting, audio. So it's really having kind of a live persistent connection that lets you affect things remotely. Whether it's like closing a water valve, locking a door, getting an alert from a water leak. So you have kind of a persistent internet connection to these like IoT devices that are deployed in a building that lets you give you awareness of what's going on. That's the basic definition that I kind of use when I think about smart tech.
Sure, absolutely. I know this may sound like a silly example, but there was back in the day there was a Disney Channel movie called Smart House, and I don't remember the exact specifics of it, but it was a family that lived in this house, and they had this smart technology. It was like the home had a personality of its own.
Yeah. I'll have to look up that one on Disney Plus, see if I can find that one. To see, Disney has always been ahead of the curve in terms of seeing what's coming. So it'll be interesting to see what they thought about it, years ago, whenever that was made. But it's kind of like like Tomorrowland and Disneyland. Like we're kind of there now with some of the tech that's out there.
Yeah, no, I know that sounds like a silly and elementary example, but it's interesting how we kind of see those things growing up, and they've all really come to serious fruition now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm just curious as well. Anytime there's any sort of new technology implemented, it obviously takes time. Kind of the value proposition. What's in it for the average person who owns a home, or the average landlord. Why should someone use a service like this instead of the status quo?
Yeah, so typically the status quo that we see with most like investors and landlords is basically waiting for the tenant to tell you that something's wrong. So kind of the eyes of the tenant. And really the language that we speak to investors about is net operating income. Because if our technology is proven to boost your net operating income as a landlord investor, and that's something that a 3-family investor to 1,000-unit investor will care about. And we kind of define net operating as basically cash, revenues minus expenses for running the property, and that directly correlates to the asset value when you divide by cap rate. So we kind of look at NOI in a few ways. So first, can we increase your top line revenue? And the answer is absolutely. There's like proven case studies of smart home tech, commanding a higher rent premium than just an apartment that has no technology in it whatsoever. So the case I always use is Invitation Homes. They're one of the largest REITs out there. They acquired a lot of the rental properties, the foreclosures during the 2008, 2009 downturn, and turned them into rentals. And they implemented the similar platform to what we utilize. And they literally charge tenants $20 a month to get access to the app. So that shows that there's a willingness for tenants to pay that to get access to the benefits of smart home technology. So revenue increase is one dimension. The second dimension is reducing expenses. So every landlord in the world will want to reduce their expenses in insurance, repairs and maintenance, utilities. So the tech allows all of that. We've proven that our water protection solution allows carriers to apply credits on insurance policies. And that's a very tangible savings where a landlord can see, here's my insurance policy pre-water protection, here's my insurance policy post-water protection. Now it's a very, very easy ROI calculation. And then a lot more and more landlords are also including utilities in their rent. And the biggest fear of most landlords is if you include utilities, the tenants could just abuse them. Open the window, run the AC in the summer, or open the window, run the heat in the winter. So the technology now allows you to kind of start controlling the ranges with which the HVAC could run. What happens if a door is open. So it's able to basically allow a landlord to reap efficiencies on energy usage, on water consumption, and then finally preventing a disaster. Being able to just imagine not having all those water issues that so many people in the South are experiencing right now because of frozen pipes. How much like time, effort, insurance claims, headaches are caused by fixing all the damage that was caused by frozen pipes and all the water damages. So those are just some of the ways that NOI is impacted. So basically increase revenues, decrease costs, protect the asset, and basically make your building very differentiated and have it protect itself versus relying on a resident to report that there's water dripping from the ceiling.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that can definitely be huge. Basically mitigating the risk and obviously, helping someone's bottom line as well. But it is interesting. One thing you touched on was, basically solving a problem before it even is a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's all about how could you head off that issue. So for example, say there was a power outage resulting from something. So you'd want to know that you no longer have power to your property. You would then want to know that, hey, there's a cold temp in my house. So I could go I could go turn on a faucet. I could, go to the area where my pipes are liable to freeze and put some heating tape on them. It basically gets ahead of the problem, because by the time you get to the water, to the water problem, it's too late. Burst pipe, too late. So it's kind of like, how do you get ahead of things and basically nip things in the bud before they become major problems? Another big one that we talk about a lot is Hvac Analytics. So in places that have really like high temperatures, like Texas, Dallas, Houston, et cetera, where summertime you're over 100 many of the days. Imagine being able to be alerted as soon as your HVAC system starts to underperform. So let's say the resident forgot to change the air filter and your AC is straining. So imagine being able to get alerted of that before you had that failure, because typically that failure is going to happen after hours or on the weekend, and that's a really expensive service call for the landlord. So it's kind of like getting ahead of problems, kind of proactively versus reactively. So the solution supports reactive as well, but it's always better to go proactive, because that just saves a lot of heartache and pain and time and wasted time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely nice to be able to have that option and kind of be able to see where particular issues would be. So, I know you kind of touched on it earlier, but could you maybe kind of paint a picture for us of, okay, maybe a landlord and a pipe does burst, how would I be notified of this, or what would that look like for me when I'm at home, just in bed or in the kitchen, right?
Yeah, sure. So part of our platform is an integrated water shutoff valve and flow meter. So this gets kind of plumbed into the water main going into the building or the unit. And not only can it detect, tied to like a point water sensor that could detect a leak around, like, let's say, a water heater or a wash machine, it could detect flow rate abnormalities. So let's say you have a burst pipe, that flow meter is going to see 8 gallons a minute for several minutes. It'll say, that's a problem. Either shut off the water automatically or send an alert to the landlord, or both. So that's like one modality where it detects like the burst. And it's actually caught this in some of my rental properties. It caught a burst exterior faucet and I was away in Philadelphia. I got an alert on my phone, high flow condition detected, called my tenants, boom, problem was solved like immediately, versus water running all night in my basement. That would have been a disaster. The second use case is running toilets. I think this is the bane of most landlords, because in many cases around the country, landlords bear the cost of water, especially up here in like the Northeast where water is not sub-metered. So a tenant doesn't really think to report a running toilet. That doesn't really directly impact them until the landlord gets the $1,000 water bill. So our system could detect like that 2 gallons a minute running for more than 60 minutes and say, hey, there's something wrong here. Now you have the ability to program what you want the valve to do, whether you want it to like shut off, send an alert, sound a buzzer, and so forth. But so a running toilet might not be a shut off the water. It might be a send an alert to the property manager, to the local person, to yourself, to the tenant, so they can kind of go check it out and see what's going on. The third is like a small leak. So think of like the water line for a refrigerator, that would slowly leak. Now you wouldn't catch that for 6 to 9 months in most cases, but by the time you catch it, you have like rotted floor, mold, a lot of like bad things that landlords want to avoid. So it could catch like the high flow, the medium flow, and the low flow condition. And also it has intelligence to catch running flappers. So periodically draining toilets that kind of drain from loose flappers. That's another like suck on NOI, because that just wastes water. So from a green angle, you can now conserve energy, conserve water, but from a practical angle as well, you can now save money because now you're not paying for wasted water. So multiply that across thousands of units, you now have a very substantial return, in addition to the insurance savings and the peace of mind knowing that your investment's likely going to be protected from the smart tech.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's definitely convenient, being able to, it almost kind of reminds me of, maybe these new security systems where you can close your garage door on your phone, you can lock your door on your phone, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And our platform integrates that all together, security as well. So now you have like one app to do it all versus early smart home days where you had an app for your thermostat, an app for your garage door, an app for your lock, and an app for your lights. Now, our platform kind of ties them all together and it operates over cellular. And we haven't really touched on that too much, but I think that's one key differentiator, especially for landlords, because cellular is going to be the best modality for that last mile communication, of the internet, because it's lower cost, it's battery backed up. So power goes out, the cell networks are still awake, and that's a huge, so for the example of, Texas and the South, when power goes out, all those Wi-Fi networks that are controlling these different smart home devices go down. Whereas our system would stay up, for as long as like you had the batteries last and some of the components.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's really what's amongst many things. That's what really speaks to me, and I find interesting about this is that you're not hamstrung to Wi-Fi.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where, and that was really the solution I was looking for, many years ago. I'm like, okay, I need something that gives me last mile connectivity without the cost. So instead of pay, at least in our market, it's about $100 to get like a business internet account at a rental property. So $100 a month, in addition to whatever cost of the technology, that's just too much for the average landlord. But if I could say, hey, for $10 a month, I could deliver a cellular connection that could give you connectivity to all these different things, most landlords would say, hey, that sounds like a pretty good deal. That's worth it, because especially when you could quantify that with the insurance savings and some of the other utility savings that you could achieve. Then it's like, okay, now that's an easy lift where it's not going to drag on my NOI. It's actually going to enhance my NOI. That's why I think makes it so appealing. And that's why I think cellular is the right technology for smart building, smart apartment.
Absolutely. Why do you think that this hasn't been, I guess, as mainstream or prevalent as maybe it should be?
I think a lot of companies have focused more on the homeowners, because everyone in your home, like I'm on a Wi-Fi connection right now, because there's so many homeowners out there. But I think we at ePropertyCare put like a laser focus on the landlord, the developer, the multifamily operator, because I think there's huge benefits. I'd argue even more so than the benefits for the homeowner to realizing some of this technology. So I think part of it's just been a lack of focus, but I think that's where we're trying to close the gap here and put a very kind of compelling platform together that allows these operators to implement this technology in a cost-effective manner and immediately realize value and benefit from having the technology in place.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Charles. It's definitely interesting any angle you look at it at, whether you currently own a multifamily property right now, or maybe you haven't even broken ground on a ground up construction deal, but that, hey, maybe this is a good service to at least put in your budget, right?
Oh, absolutely, because especially because I think in the retrofit applications, I think we're kind of seeing the water protection being a very hot seller because it's easy to retrofit water protection into a building. I think asking a landlord to replace, 1,000 locks and 1,000 thermostats that they already purchased midway through the hold period that they have, that's a harder ask. Now, in some cases, it makes financial sense depending upon the situation of the building, but getting in early on the new constructions, that's really where we put a lot of focus, because now we can say, hey, roll this into your capital call, put a little extra money into some of this smart technology, and you'll get this return on it. And that's a much easier ask than asking to, for a fresh capital call to replace some stuff that midway through the hold period. So we kind of support both use cases. We have plenty of retrofits going on as well as plenty of new constructions, but new constructions allow you to basically design in a full technology stack for the building. You have everything from like the video intercoms to the video cameras to the access control to the water protection, thermostats, lights, locks, etc. So it lets you kind of, and every building is going to be a little different. Like for like a Class C property, they might not go as heavy on like the amenities, but for like a Class A or Class B property, the amenities become very important, because there you could command a much higher rent by having those amenities in place relative to the building next door that might just be on an old key system where the residents carry around keys or even fobs to get around.
Sure, absolutely. No, this is pretty interesting on so many different fronts, but also, in terms of the cost savings as well. I know you mentioned something earlier, mentioning insurance and potential savings on insurance. Could you kind of elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, sure. So I think right now a lot of like the kind of premium carriers in the market, like Chubb, Pure, AIG, they have specific credits tied to electronic water protection, because water is really the biggest problem that these insurance companies have, because water causes $2 billion of damage, and a lot of that's preventable, just because people don't catch it. You have a leak on the 5th floor of a building destroying 5 floors. Those are huge insurance claims. So a lot of these carriers are highly motivated to get water protection solutions in place. So we've been working with several carriers in like the Northeast and the South that say, hey, if your solution's in place in these buildings, my risk profile goes way down. So I'll allow that insurance agency to apply higher credits on this policy, because I know that my loss has gone way down. So we're seeing in some cases, 10 to 15% savings on insurance premiums resulting from our water protection solution. And for the average kind of deployment, that pays for itself in typically less than a year. So if you think about, okay, I'm investing in water protection to protect my building, prevent damage, protect against running toilets, it pays for itself in a year. Then after a year, I basically reap all these benefits. And most people will say that sounds like a pretty good deal to me. And that's kind of how that's really how we position it. And then we say, hey, but there's more. We can now put temperature protection to detect before you get to that point of having that frozen pipe or what. So the platform is scalable and allows people to add what they need for a building. So they're not paying for stuff they don't need, but gives them flexibility to add new modalities, depending upon how their needs evolve over time.
Sure, absolutely. It's neat how you kind of mentioned those different modalities. You can kind of custom, you can kind of tailor it towards, if you have a Class A property, maybe commanding a higher rent, or maybe a Class C property, it's kind of, you can basically tailor make it to what you need.
Yeah, absolutely. It gives people flexibility. And what we find is a lot of landlords will basically solve their most like burning problem. In some cases that's water protection, in other places that's temperature. But then I'm like, you know what? Let me add a couple of things to the system, because I want to be able to do this now. So we kind of see a lot of people that once they realize how easy the tech is to implement and to use, it doesn't require a electrical engineering degree or a PhD to run. I use the example that my father, he's 80 years old. He uses our solution for his rental property, and he can't even get on a Zoom call. So if he's able to do it, anyone could use this technology and not feel intimidated. So I'd say it's easy to use, it's flexible, and it allows people to kind of go at their own speed. But once they see how easy it is, we see a lot of people just add more, because they see that, okay, this makes, I can turn off a light, I can adjust the thermostat and not have to drive over. And especially now in COVID times, no one wants to do the in-person stuff. So if I'm a real estate agent or a property manager and have 1,000 tenants turning, I don't want to have 1,000 people come by my office to like exchange a key and hand off a key. If I could just sit on my computer or my phone and like send in the codes to all the properties and tell the tenants, go, here's your code, go right in. That's much safer and better for all. So I think there's a lot of cool, cool benefits, for COVID, for other things, just to be safer for everyone.
Sure thing, absolutely. And it's also, I mean, potential, I guess potentially less costs incurred for the landlord as well. Maybe less work slightly for a maintenance person to do, right?
Oh yeah, like we get examples all the time of like property managers saying, "Hey, I have to pay my maintenance person an extra hour, of time because they're driving to pick up a key and dropping off the key after the job." So imagine that the person goes straight to the job and leave and go home and not have to come to the office to pick up a key. So there's a lot of efficiencies on maintenance and repairs and on tenant terms. You not have to, out here in Cape Cod, a lot of people go, spend the summer down in the Cape, and they have to literally drive to a rental leasing office to like pick up a key, go to the house, and then when they leave, they got to drop the key off at this office. Like that's just like a horrible experience. That's not needed, not necessary anymore. When you can say, here's your code, it only works during this period of time, and then it expires. Boom, you can now set your codes for the whole summer and not have to worry about it, and be a lot safer than using that same key or using that same code. And that's what we find a lot of the first generation solutions did. I just use the same code because I have to go to the lock to physically punch in this code to change the code. So I'll just leave it in there. That's even less safe than the key. So now our solution solves that critical gap in the security of these locks and these codes.
Sure. I mean, there's so many different angles you can take with this, from a health perspective, I guess less contact between people. From a security perspective, like you said, you just set that code once and it can last for the whole summer.
Yeah. Or every week of the summer is a different code and then it expires. So depends on what the landlord wants to do. The point is you have flexibility and remote control. And I think that's the most important thing, because you can sit here at home, take care of that versus having to be on the ground to change a key or change a code. That's really where it really makes things a lot easier for everyone, the tenant, the property manager, the owner, the landlord, et cetera.
Sure thing. And it's the temperature controlling, I think, is really interesting as well. I guess last week was a crazy week for us, given that we had so much snow in Texas, kind of a pretty out of the ordinary event. But one thing that would generally be more realistic for us would be, the AC going out during the summertime, right?
Absolutely. And that's kind of where and I have rental properties in Texas, in Dallas and in Houston. And during like hot season and cold season, I'm getting continual alerts from my property to tell me like what's going on, and to basically give me like real-time alerts that, hey, it's 80 degrees inside. Okay, well, something's wrong. Let me get someone out there before it's that emergency call. And that just makes sure that saves you a lot of money, because you're basically paying half now for that repair than what you would pay once it's like 90 or 100 degrees inside the house, and now it's an emergency. So it kind of, and then the other big thing in Texas is your AC's running, so you have condensate pumps. So a lot of people, those things clog all the time, and now you have water leaks resulting from a clogged condensate pump. So we have solutions that could detect the water, but also that could connect to the condensate pump and tell you that, hey, your condensate pump has failed. I'm going to automatically turn off the HVAC to not cause a water damage. So the system's smart like that, where it could where components could talk to each other and have these automation to prevent damage. So that's a real use case of, in hot weather, you can now eliminate condensate pumps as a source of problems for your property.
Sure thing. Yeah, absolutely. In terms of, rough things we'd have to deal with aside from the snow last week, probably two big things that people would think of would maybe be, right, those water leaks that, maybe the AC going on in the summertime, but also maybe natural disasters like hurricanes on the Gulf Coast.
Yeah, and hurricanes is probably very analogous to kind of like what happened, last week, right, with power outages. Because once power goes out, you typically have no eyes on a property. Like what's going on in my house while I evacuate up north from Galveston. Like those are things that are probably go through a lot of people's minds. So I think that's kind of a nice thing about kind of a cellular battery powered solution. Because our hub will stay online, because typically those cell towers will still be transmitting for several days. So you could have awareness of like what's going on in your property and just eliminate a lot of unknown of like, well, is there water? Is the door open? Is it cold? Is it hot? Those are things that people would just want to know, as everyone's curious about what's going on in the property, especially during a disaster. So it gives you a little bit more peace of mind. Now, obviously it couldn't stop a hurricane. It's not going to do that, but it could tell you that, hey, you got water in your house. Like that's something that you'd want to know. And maybe there's some things you could do remotely to minimize the resulting damage. So it's not going to be the be all end all, because if your roof blows off, there's not much it could do. But if you have a leak or a hot temp or a cold temp or an open door, it could give you awareness of that. So you can basically take action before it leads to like a bigger problem.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense, Charles. I can definitely see the value in that, regardless of, where geographically you own your properties or different asset classes. It can definitely be very, very helpful service.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I know that you've kind of talked a bit, a bit about your background in semiconductors, transitioning into, kind of what you're doing now. Let's say that I am actually a property owner, or I am a builder or a developer. At what time should we consult with you and your service to maybe figure into our costs?
Yeah, I'd say when you start thinking about what amenities you want to implement in your building, because early on the construction process is easy to plan in, because you basically could spec out a different thermostat or a different lock that's compatible with the system, and now you're kind of future proofed for 5 to 10 years, not to worry about that. So we always say earlier the better, especially before like mechanicals and the plumbing and electrical roughs, because a lot of the plumbing stuff, because you could deploy a solution in different ways, and if you have access to all the plumbing, there are some things you could do that could greatly reduce the cost of the solution or the accuracy, improve the accuracy of the solution. So that's kind of where earlier the better. But even if it's like late in the construction process, like we've come into buildings that already have all the firewalls up, all the insulation blown, and still been able to like retrofit video cameras and other kind of smart items in a building. So it's never too late, but the earlier the better, because once you have finished walls and insulation and firewalls, it's harder to get wires and stuff done. So anytime, but earlier the better is what I'd recommend.
Sure thing, Charles. Absolutely. So we've talked a bit, about your background, a bit about, the service, how you can kind of incorporate it in your potential strategy. Is there anything else you haven't said that you'd really just like to hammer home?
No, I think we covered most of it, really. I think the key message that we drive for like landlords is boost your NOI, increase rents, decrease costs, have better protection of your assets. So the solution is, cellular, it's low cost, it gives you flexibility and modularity, and you can control everything from a single app. So now you can have a portfolio of properties around the country, all controllable via your phone. That's a pretty appealing thing for most people. Or you could delegate it to your property managers or other people on the ground to have that access to the alerts. You can kind of choose your own level of play. So we're definitely very happy to give like free consultations or help people figure out the best strategy for deploying this technology, either if it's through us or through others. We're just a big advocate and big believer in the benefits. So that's where we encourage people to learn more. Come to our website, ePropertyCare.com, and we'd love to help you out.
Okay, absolutely. I know you mentioned, your website and offering those consultations. Maybe someone's listening, they want to collaborate with you in the future, or maybe they have any other questions about maybe, services you offer. Maybe they're just wanting some advice. Where else can we find you aside from the website?
Yeah, you could email me at charles@ePropertyCare.com. I'm pretty responsive over email. But I'm always happy to help people in the real estate world, because I bought rental properties at a very young age in like my early 20s, and it's been the best investment that I made in my life, from a financial perspective. So I'm a big believer, and I kind of see how tech could even make it easier and more accessible for people to invest in properties, because now you have a way to kind of better protect and control the asset. So it allows people now to do out-of-state rentals in a way that typically people would steer clear of. So better cap rates, better returns in one state, you can now get property in that state and now be able to remotely control and monitor it. So it gives you a lot of flexibility as an investor. And that's really one of the more exciting things that I kind of learned more from, luck, I'd say, from the various moves that I've had. But I think as a strategy, it can allow people to invest in other markets in a very different way and have better awareness and control.
Absolutely, Charles. Basically any way you look at it, regardless of what, sort of property you have or whether it's a new build or development, it seems like a pretty versatile service that I think it's gonna change the way that people operate.
I agree, but I greatly appreciate the time here, Aaron. I enjoyed the conversation here.
Yeah, absolutely, Charles. Well, thank you so much. You've been a wonderful guest. I've learned a lot about your service and basically what it can offer people. So it's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Talk later.